Many Waters by Madeleine L'Engle. Some things had to be believed to be seen. Sandy and his twin brother Dennys are the practical, down-to-earth members of the Murry family. They have never paid much attention to their scientist parents' talk of highly theoretical things like tesseracts and farondolae. But now something has happened to Sandy and Dennys that drastically stretches their powers of belief. And when disaster threatens the oasis where they have made their home, can they find a way back to their own time? Many Waters is the fourth book in Madeleine L'Engle's classic Time Quintet. Chapter 1. Virtual Particles and Virtual Unicorns. A sudden snow shower put an end to hockey practice. We can't even see the puck, Sandy Murry shouted across the wind. Let's go home. He skated over to the side of the frozen pond, sitting on an already snow-covered rock to take off his skates. There were calls of agreement from the other skaters. Dennys, Sandy's twin brother, followed him, snow gathering in his lashes so that he had to blink in order to see the rock. Why do we have to live in the highest, coldest, windiest spot in the state? Hoots of laughter and shouted goodbyes came from the other boys. Where else would you want to live? Dennys was asked. Sandy was sliding icily down the inside of his collar. Bali, Fiji, someplace warm. One of the boys knotted his skate laces and slung his skates around his neck. Would you really? With all those tourists? Yeah, and jet setters crowding the beach, and beautiful people, and litterbugs. One by one, the other boys drifted off, leaving the twins. I thought you liked winter, Sandy said. By mid-March, I'm getting tired of it. But you wouldn't really want to go to some tourist paradise, would you? Oh, probably not. Maybe I would have in the olden days, but before the population explosion. I'm famished. Race you home. By the time they reached their house, an old white farmhouse about a mile from the village, the snow was beginning to let up, though the wind was still strong. They went in through the garage, past their mother's lab. Pulling off their windbreakers, they threw them at hooks and burst into the kitchen. Where's everybody? Sandy called. Dennys pointed to a piece of paper held by magnets to the refrigerator door. They both went up to it to read, Dear twins, I'm off to town with Meg and Charles Wallace for our dental checkups. Your turn is next week. Don't think you can get out of it. You've both grown so much this year that it's essential you have your teeth checked. Love, Mother. Sandy bared his teeth ferociously. We've never had a cavity. Dennys made a similar grimace. But we have grown. We're just under 6 feet. Bet if we were measured today, we'd be over. Dennys opened the door to the refrigerator. There was half a chicken in an earthenware dish with a sign, verbatim, this is for dinner. Sandy pulled out the meat keeper. Ham all right? Sure, with cheese and mustard and sliced olives and ketchup and pickles. No tomatoes here. Bet you Meg made herself a BLT. There's lots of liverwurst. Mother likes that. Yuck. It's okay with cream cheese and onion. They put their various ingredients on the kitchen counter and cut thick slices of bread fresh from the oven. Dennys peered in to sniff apples slowly baking. Sandy looked over to the kitchen table where Meg had spread out her books and papers. She's taken more than her fair share of the table. She's in college, Dennys defended. We don't have as much homework as she does. Yeah, and I hate that long commute every day. She likes to drive, and at least she gets home early. Dennys plunked his own books down on the big table. Sandy stood looking at one of Meg's open notebooks. Hey, listen to this. Do you suppose we'll have this kind of junk when we're in college? It seems quite evident that there was definite prebiotic existence of protein ancestors of polymers, and that therefore the primary beings were not amino acids. I suppose she knows what she's writing about. I haven't the foggiest. Dennis flipped back a page. Look at her title. The $1 million question. The chicken or the egg. Amino acids or their polymers. She may be a mathematical genius, but she still can't spell. You mean, you know what she's writing about? Sandy demanded. I have a pretty good idea. It's the kind of thing mother and dad argue about at dinner. Polymers, virtual particles, quasars, all that stuff. Sandy looked at his twin. You mean you listen? Sure, why not? You never know when a little useless knowledge is going to come in handy. Hey, what's this book? It's about bubonic plague. I'm the one who wants to be a doctor. Sandy glanced over. It's history, not medicine, stoop. Hey, why are lawyers never bitten by snakes? Dennis asked. I don't know, and don't care. Well, you're the one who wants to be the lawyer. Come on, why do lawyers never get bitten by snakes? I give up. Why do lawyers never get bitten by snakes? Professional courtesy? Sandy groaned. Very funny. Ha ha. Dennis slathered mustard over a thick slice of ham. When I think about the amount of schooling still ahead of us, I almost lose my appetite. Almost. Well, not quite. Sandy opened the refrigerator door, looking for something else to pile on his sandwich. We seem to eat more than the rest of the family put together. Charles Wallace eats like a bird. Well, judging by the amount we spend on bird feed, birds are terrible gluttons. But you know what I mean. At least he's settling down in school, and the other kids aren't picking on him the way they used to. He still doesn't look more than 6, but half the time, I think he knows more than we do. We're certainly the ordinary run-of-the-mill ones in the family. The family can do with some ordinary run-of-the-mill people, and we're not exactly dumb. If I'm going to be a doctor and you're going to be a lawyer, we've got to be bright enough for all the education. I'm thirsty. Sandy opened the cupboard above the kitchen door. Only a year before, they had been too short to reach it without climbing on a stool. Where's the Dutch cocoa? That's what I want. Sandy moved various boxes of lentils, barley, kidney beans, cans of tuna, and salmon. But Mother's got it out in the lab. Let's go look. Dennis sliced more ham. Sandy put a large steel pickle in his mouth. Let's finish making the sandwiches first. Food first. Fine. With sandwiches an inch or more thick in their hands and full mouths, they went back onto the pantry and turned it into the lab. In the early years of the century, when the house had been part of a working dairy farm, the lab had been used to keep milk, butter, eggs, and there was still a large churn in one corner, which now served to hold a lamp. The work counter with a stone sink functioned as well for holding lab equipment as it had for milk and eggs. There was now a formidable-looking microscope, some strange equipment only their mother understood, and an old-fashioned Bunsen burner, over which, on a homemade tripod, a black kettle was simmering. Sandy sniffed appreciatively. Stew. I think we're supposed to call it beef. Boof. Bouillon. Dennis reached up to the shelf over the sink and pulled down a square red tin. Here's the cocoa. Mother and Dad like it at bedtime. When's Dad coming home? Dennis wanted to know. Tomorrow night, I think Mother said. Sandy, his mouth full, held his hands out to the wood stove. If we had our driver's licenses, we could go to the airport to meet him. We're good drivers already. Dennis agreed. Sandy stuffed another large bite of sandwich into his mouth and left the warmth of the stove to wander to the far corner of the lab where there was a not quite ordinary looking computer. How long has Dad had this gizmo here? He put it in last week. Mother wasn't particularly pleased. Well, it is supposed to be her lab, Sandy said. What's he programming? Dennys asked. He's usually pretty good about explaining, even though I don't understand most of it. Tessering and red shifting and space-time continuum and stuff. Sandy stared at the keyboard, which had 8 rather than the usual 4 ranks of keys. Half of these symbols are Greek. I mean, literally Greek. Dennys, ramming the last of his sandwich into his mouth, peered over his twin's shoulder. Well, I more or less get the usual science signs. That looks like Hebrew there, and that's Cyrillic. I haven't the faintest idea what these keys are for. Sandy looked down at the lab floor, which consisted of large slabs of stone. There was a thick rug by the sink, and another in front of the shabby leather chair and reading lamp. I don't know how Mother stands this place in winter. She dresses like an Eskimo. Dennys shivered, but put out one finger and tapped on the standard keys of the computer. Take me someplace warm. Hey, I don't think we ought to mess with that, Sandy warned. What do you expect? A genie to pop up like the one in Aladdin and the magic lamp? This is just a computer, for heaven's sake. It can't do anything it isn't programmed to do. Okay, then. Sandy held his finger over the keyboard. A lot of people think computers are alive. I mean, really, sort of like Aladdin's genie. He tapped out on the standard keys, someplace warm and sparsely populated. Dennys shouldered him aside, adding, low humidity. Sandy turned away from the odd computer. Let's make the cocoa. Sure. Dennys picked up the red tin, which he had set down on the counter. Since Mother's using the Bunsen burner, we better go back to the kitchen to make the cocoa. Okay, it's warmer there anyhow. I could do with another sandwich. If they've gone all the way into town, supper will probably be late. They left the lab, closing the door behind them. Hey, Sandy pointed. We didn't see this. There was a small note taped to the door. Experiment in progress. Please keep out. Uh-oh. Hope we didn't upset anything. We better tell Mother when she gets back. Why didn't we see that note? We were busy stuffing our faces. Dennys crossed the hall and opened the kitchen door and was met with a blast of heat. Hey! He tried to step back, but Sandy was on his heels. Fire! Sandy yelled. Get the fire extinguisher! Too late! We better get out, Anne! Dennys heard the kitchen door slam behind them. We've got to get out! Sandy yelled. I can't find the fire extinguisher! I can't find the walls! Dennys strode through a pervasive mist, his hands touching nothing. Came a great sonic boom, then absolute silence. Slowly, the mist began to clear away to dissipate. Hey! Sandy's changing voice cracked and soared. What's going on? Dennys' equally cracking voice followed. We're on Earth? What's happened? What was that explosion? Hey! They looked around to see nothing familiar. No kitchen door. No kitchen. No fireplace with its fragrant logs. No table with its pot of brightly blooming geraniums. No ceiling strung with rows of red peppers and white garlic. No floor with the colorful braided rugs. They were standing on sand, burning white sand. Above them, the sun was in a sky so hot that it was no longer blue but had a bronze cast. There was nothing but sand and sky from horizon to horizon. Is the house all right? Sandy's voice shook. I don't think we went into the house at all. You don't think it was on fire? No. I think we opened the door and we were here. What about the mist and the sonic boom? And what about Dad's computer? Uh-oh. What are we going to do? Dennys' voice started out in the bass, short, and and cracked to a piercing treble. "Don't panic," Sandy warned, but his voice trembled. Both boys looked around wildly. The brazen sunlight beat down on them. After the coldest snow and ice, the sudden heat was shocking. Small particles of mica in the sand caught the light and blazed up at them. "Hey!" Dennis's voice cracked again. What are we going to do?" Sandy tried to speak calmly. "We're the ones who do things, remember? We just did something." Dennis was bitter. "We just blew ourselves here, wherever here is." Sandy agreed. "Stupid. We were stupid, mucking around with an experiment in progress. Only we didn't know it was in progress. We should have stopped to think." Dennis looked around at sky and sand, both shimmering with heat. What do you suppose Dad was up to? If we knew that, space travel, tessering, getting past the speed of light, you know that. Anxiety made Dennis sharp. The sun beat down on Sandy's head so that he reached up and wiped sweat from around his eyes. "I wish we'd never thought of that Dutch cocoa." Dennis pulled off his heavy cable knit sweater, licked his dry lips, moaned, "Lemonade!" Sandy, too, stripped off his sweater. "We got what we asked for, didn't we? Heat, low humidity, sparse population." Dennis looked around, squinting against the glare. Sparse wasn't meant to mean nobody. Sandy unbuttoned his plaid flannel shirt. I thought we asked for a beach. Not on Dad's gizmo, we didn't. Just sparse population. Do you suppose we blown ourselves onto a dead planet? Well, one where the sun is going into its red giant phase before it blows up? Despite the intense heat, Sandy shivered, glanced at the sun, then quickly away. "I think the sun in its red giant phase would be bigger. This sun doesn't look any larger than our own sun in movies set in deserts." "Do you suppose it is our own sun?" Dennis asked hopefully. Sandy shrugged. "We could be anywhere in the universe. If we were going to play with that doggone keyboard, we should have been more specific. I wish we just settle for Bali or Fiji, beautiful people or no. I'd just as soon see a beautiful person right now. I wish we hadn't done whatever it is we've done." Dennis pulled off his cotton turtleneck, stripping down to his white briefs and tank top. Sandy stood on one leg to start pulling off his warmly lined pants, glanced again at the fierce sun, then quickly closed his eyes. "They'll miss us when they get back from the dentist, but they won't know where to look. Mother has more sense than we have. She'd never mess around with anything of Dad's unless he was right there. Mother's not interested in astrophysics. She's into virtual particles and things like that. She'll still miss us." Dad'll be home tomorrow," Sandy said hopefully. He was now stripped to his underclothes. Dennis picked up his things and made a tiny bundle. "Unless we find some shade, we're going to have to put our clothes back on in half an hour, or at least some of them, or we'll get a vicious sunburn." "Shade," Sandy groaned and scanned the horizon. "Den, do I see a palm tree?" Dennis held his hand to shade his eyes. "Where?" "There, all the way over there." "Yes, no, yes. Let's head toward it." "Good. At least it's something to do." Dennis trudged off. If it's the same time of day it was when we left home, it was winter at home. Sandy's eyes were almost closed against the glare. The sun was already setting. Dennis pointed to the shadows as long and skinny as they were. "The sun's slightly behind us. We might be heading east, if it's our own kind of sun." Sandy asked, "Are you scared?" "I am. We've really got ourselves into a mess." Dennis made no reply. They trudged along. They had left on their shoes and socks, and Dennis suggested it might be easier walking barefooted. Sandy bent down and touched the sand with the palm of his hand, then shook his head. "Feel it! It would burn our feet. Do you still see that palm tree?" "I think so." They moved across the sand in silence. After a few minutes, it seemed firmer under their feet, and they saw that there was rock under the sand. "That's better," Sandy said. "Hey!" The ground seemed to shudder under their feet. Dennis flailed his arms to try to keep his balance, but was flung to the ground. "Is this an earthquake or something?" Sandy, too, was thrown down. Around them, they could hear a noisy grating of rock and a deep, thunderous roaring beneath them. Then there was silence, abrupt and complete. The rock steadied under them. The earthquake, or whatever it was, had lasted less than a minute, but it had been a sufficient force to push up a large section of rock, making a small cliff about 6 feet high. It was striated and raw-looking, but it provided a shadow that stretched across the sand. Both boys climbed to their feet and headed into the welcome shade. Sandy touched the sheared-off rock, and it felt cool. Maybe we could sit here for a minute. The sun was still fiercely hot, but the slab of rock they sat on was cool. The relief of the shade was so great that for a few minutes they sat in silence. Their bodies were slippery with sweat. It trickled into their eyes. They sat without moving, trying to take every advantage of the shade. I don't know what's going to happen next, but whatever it is, I'm not likely to be surprised, Sandy said at last. Are you sure it was Dad's experiment we weren't supposed to interrupt? Couldn't it have been Mother's? Mother's doing something with subatomic particles again, Dennys said. Last night at dinner, she spent most of the time talking about virtual particles. It sounded crazy to me, Sandy said. Particles which have a tendency to life. That's right, Dennys nodded. Virtual particles, almost particles, what you said, particles which tend to be. Sandy shook his head. Most of Mother's subatomic experiments are sort of infinite infinite small. It hasn't mattered if we come into the lab. But maybe if she's looking for a virtual particle, then it sounded hopeful. No, it sounds to me more like something of Dad's. It was just sort of wishful thinking when I asked if it could be something of Mother's. Why didn't we see that notice on the door? Yeah, why? And I wish our parents did ordinary things, Sandy complained. If Dad were a plumber or an electrician, and if Mother were somebody's secretary, it would be a lot easier for us. And we wouldn't have to be such great athletes and good guys at school, Dennys agreed. And he broke off as the earth started to tremble again. It was a brief tremor with no heaving of stones, but both boys sprang to their feet. Hey! Sandy jumped, almost knocking Dennys over. From behind the rock cliff came a very small person, perhaps 4 feet tall, not a child. He was firmly muscled, darkly tan, and there was a down of hair across his upper lip and on his chin. He wore a loincloth with a small pouch at the waist. As he saw them, he reached for the pouch in a swift, alarmed gesture. Hey, wait! Sandy held up his open hands, palm forward. Dennys repeated the gesture. We won't hurt you. Who are you? Sandy asked. Where are we? Dennys added. The small man looked at them in mingled curiosity and fear. Giants! He cried. He had a man's voice, a young man's voice, deeper than Sandy's or Dennys's. Sandy shook his head. We're not giants. We're boys, Dennys augmented. Who are you? The young man touched himself lightly on the forehead. Japheth. That's your name? Sandy asked. He touched his forehead again. Japheth. Perhaps this was the custom of the country. Wherever in the universe it was. Sandy touched his own forehead. Alexander. Sandy. Dennys made the same gesture. Dennys. Giants, the young man stated. No, Sandy corrected. Boys. The young man rubbed his head where a purplish egg was forming. Stone hit me. Must be seeing double. Japheth? Sandy asked. The young man nodded. Are you 2 or 1? He rubbed his eyes perplexedly. 2, Sandy said. We're twins. I'm Sandy. He's Dennys. Twins? Japheth asked, his fingers once more reaching for the pouch at his side, which appeared to be filled with tiny arrows about 2 inches long. Dennys opened his hands wide. Twins are when... he had started to give a scientific explanation, stopped himself. When a mother has a litter of 2 babies instead of 1, his voice was soothing. You're animals then? Sandy shook his head. We're boys. He was ready to ask, what are you, when he noticed a tiny bow near the pouch of arrows. No, no. The young man looked at them doubtfully. Only giants are as tall as you, and the seraphim and Nephilim, but you have no wings. What was this about wings? Dennys asked. Please, Jay, where are we? Where is this place? The desert, about an hour from my oasis. I came out, dowsing for water. He bent down and picked up a wand of pliable wood. Gopher wood is the best for dowsing, and I have my grandfather's. He stopped in mid-sentence. Hegalian! Hig! Where are you? He called, and the twins might have called for their dog at home. Hig! He looked wide-eyed at the twins. If anything has happened to him, my grandfather will. There are so few of them left. He called again urgently. Hegalian! From behind the outcropping of rock came something gray and sinuous, which the twins at first thought was a snake, but it was followed by a head with small, bright black eyes and great fans of ears, and a chunky body covered with shaggy gray hair and a thin little rope of a tail. Hegalian! The young man was joyful. Why didn't you come when I called you? With its supple trunk, the little animal, the size of a small dog or a large cat, indicated the twins. The young man patted his head. He was so small that he did not have to bend down. Thank God you're all right. He gestured toward the twins. They seem friendly. They say they aren't giants, and while they're as tall as seraphim or Nephilim, they don't seem to be of their kind. Cautiously, the little animal approached Sandy, who dropped to one knee, holding out his hand for the creature to sniff. Then, tentatively, he began to scratch the hairy chest as he would have scratched their dog at home. When the little animal relaxed under his touch, he asked Japheth, What's seraphim? And Nephilim, Dennys added. If they could find out what these people were, who were as tall as they, it might give them some kind of a clue as to where they had landed. Oh, very tall, Japheth said. Like you, but different. Great wings, much long hair, and their bodies, like you, not hairy. The seraphim are golden, and the Nephilim are whiter than sand. Your skin, it is different. Pale and smooth, and as though you never saw sun. At home, it's still winter, Sandy explained. We get very tan in the summer when we work outdoors. Your little animal, Dennys questioned, looks sort of like an elephant, but what is it? It's a mammoth. Japheth slapped the creature affectionately. Sandy withdrew his hand from petting Hegalian, but mammoths aren't supposed to be huge. Dennys saw in his mind's eye a picture of a mammoth in a nature book at home, very like Japheth's animal. Japheth himself was a miniature version of a strong and handsome young man, not a great deal older than themselves, perhaps as old as their sister's friend Calvin, who was in graduate school. Perhaps in this place, wherever it was, everything was a miniature. There aren't many mammoths left, Japheth explained. I'm a good dowser, but mammoths are very fine for sensing water and Hegalian is the best of all. He patted the little animal's head, so we borrowed him from Grandfather Lamech, and together we found a good source of water, but I'm afraid it's too far from the oasis to be much use. Thank you for explaining, Sandy said, then turned to Dennys. Do you think we're dreaming? No, we came home from hockey practice. We made sandwiches. We went into the lab to find the Dutch cocoa. We messed around with Dad's experiment in progress. We were stupid beyond belief, but it isn't a dream. I'm glad to hear you say that, Japheth said. I was beginning to wonder myself. I thought I might be dreaming because of the stone hitting my head in the earthquake. It was an earthquake? Sandy asked. Japheth nodded. They come quite often. The seraphim tells us that things are unsettled yet. So maybe this is a young planet. Dennys sounded hopeful. Japheth asked, Where have you come from and where are you going? Take me to your leader, Sandy murmured. Dennys nudged him. Shut up. Sandy said. We're from planet Earth, late 20th century. We got here by accident, and we don't know where we're going. We like to go home, Dennys added, but we don't know how. Where is home? Japheth asked. Sandy sighed. A long way away, I'm afraid. Japheth looked at them. You are flushed and wet. He himself did not seem to feel the intense heat. Dennys said, We're perspiring profusely. I'm afraid we'll get sunstroke if we don't find shade soon. Japheth nodded. Grandfather Lamech's tent is closed. My wife and I, he flushed with pleasure as he said, my wife, live halfway across the oasis by my father's tent. And I had to return Higayon to grandfather anyhow, and he's very hospitable. I'll take it to him if you like. Thank you, Sandy said. We'd like to come with you, Dennys added. At this point, we don't have much choice, Sandy murmured. Dennys nudged him, but took his turtleneck from the bundle of clothes and pulled it back on, his head emerging from the rolled cotton neck, which had mussed up his light brown hair so that the tuft stuck out like a parakeet's. We better cover ourselves. I think I'm sunburned already. Let's go then, Japheth said. I like to be home before dark. Hey, Sandy said suddenly. At least we speak the same language. Everything's been so wild and weird I hadn't realized it till... Japheth looked at him in a puzzled manner. You sound very strange to me, but I can't understand you. If I listen with my underhearing, you talk a little like the seraphim and the Nephilim. You can understand me? The twins looked at each other. Sandy said, I hadn't really thought about it till now. If I think about it, you do sound, well, different, but I can't understand you. Right, Den? Right. Dennys agreed, except it was easier when we weren't thinking about it. Come on, Japheth urged. Let's go. He looked at Sandy. You better cover yourself, too. Sandy followed Dennis's example and pulled out his turtleneck. Dennys unrolled his flannel shirt and draped it over his head, sort of like a bird nose to keep us from getting sunstroke. Good idea. Sandy did the same. If, Dennys added morosely, it isn't already too late. Then, he said, Hey, Japh, and stumbled over the name. Hey, Jay, what's that? On the horizon to the far left, moving toward them, appeared a creature which shimmered in and out of their vision, silvery in color, as large as a goat or a pony, with light flickering out from its forehead. Sandy almost shortened Japheth's name. What's that, Jay? The mammoth pushed its head under Sandy's head, and it began to scratch between the great fan-like ears. Japheth looked toward the barely visible creature, smiling in recognition. Oh, that's a unicorn. They're very odd. Sometimes they are, and sometimes they aren't. If we want one, we call, and it'll usually appear. Did you call in one? Sandy asked. Higayon may have thought about one, but he didn't really call it. That's why it isn't all the way solid. Unicorns are even better about sensing for water than mammoths, except that you can't always count to them. But probably... Higayon thought one might be able to confirm where we thought there was a spring. He smiled ruefully. Grandfather always knows what Hig is thinking, and I make guesses. The twins stopped and looked at each other, but the mammoth had left Sandy and was trotting after Japheth, who was walking toward the oasis again, so they followed. In the intensity of the desert heat, their limbs felt heavy and uncooperative. When they looked to where the unicorn had been, it was no longer there, though there was left... in its place a mirage-like shimmering. Sandy panted, I don't believe this. Dennys, jogging beside him, agreed. We've never had very, very willing suspensions of disbelief. We're the pragmatists of the family. I still don't believe it, Sandy said. If I blink often enough, we'll be back in the kitchen at home. Dennys took one of the flapping sleeves of his shirt and wiped his eyes. What I believe right now is that I'm hot. Japheth turned his head and looked back. Giants! Come on, stop talking! With their long legs, it was easy enough for the twins to catch up with Japheth. We're not giants, Dennys reiterated. My name is Dennys. Dennison. Dennys touched his forehead, as Japheth had done. One Dennys. Me. Sandy, too, touched his forehead. I'm Sandy. Sand, Japheth looked around. We have plenty of sand. No, Jay, Sandy corrected. It's short for Alexander. Sandy. Japheth shook his head. You call me Jay. I call you Sand. Sand is something I understand. Talking of strange names, Dennys looked at the mammoth, who was again butting at Sandy to be petted. Hig. Higayan. Japheth sounded it out. Are all mammoths his size, or are there some really big ones? Japheth looked puzzled. Those that are left are like Higayan. Sandy looked at his brother. Didn't horses start out very little back in prehistory? But Dennys was looking at the horizon. Look, now you can see that there are lots of palm trees. Although they could now see that there were many trees, the oasis was still far away. Despite their much longer legs, the boys began to lag behind Japheth and the mammoth, who were moving across the sand at an easy run. I'm not sure I can take it, Dennys said, grunting. Sandy steps 2 lagged. I thought we were the great athletes, he said, panting. We've never been exposed to heat like this before. Japheth, evidently realizing that they were no longer behind him, turned around and jogged back toward them, seemingly cool and unwinded. What's the matter? You're both all red, the same red. You truly are two people? We're twins. Sandy's voice was an exhausted croak. Dennys panted. I think we're getting heat prostration. Japheth looked at him anxiously. Sun sickness can be dangerous. He reached up and touched Dennys's cheek, shook his head. You're cold and clammy. Bad sign. He put his hand against his forehead, appeared to be thinking deeply. Then, what about a unicorn? What about it? Sandy asked. He felt tired and irritable. If we could get a couple of unicorns to become real and solid for us, they could carry you to the oasis. The twins looked at each other, each seeing a red, sweating mirror version of himself. We've never gone in for mythical beasts, Dennys said. Sandy added, Meg's unicorns have been ruined by overpopularity. Japheth frowned. I don't understand what you're saying. Dennys too frowned, thinking. Then, Jay's unicorns sound more like Mother's virtual particles than like mythical beasts. Sandy was exasperated. Virtual particles aren't mythical, they're theoretical. Dennys shot back. If Mother can't believe in her whale theories, we ought to be able to believe in virtual unicorns. What kind of unicorns? Japheth looked puzzled. Is it because you're some strange kind of giants that there's all this confusion? Unicorns have never been a matter of particular importance before. Sandy wiped his hands across his face and was surprised to find that the beads of sweat were indeed cold. They're important now, Dennys groaned. Mother believes in virtual particles, so there's no reason there can't be virtual unicorns. Hig, Japheth urged. The mammoth turned and faced the horizon. A faint shimmering glimmered on the sand in front of him. Slowly it took the shape of a unicorn, transparent but recognizable. Beside it, another unicorn began to shimmer. Please, unicorns, Dennys begged, be real. Slowly, the transparency of both creatures began to solidify until there were 2 unicorns standing on the sand with silvery gray flanks, silver manes and beards, silver hooves, and horns of brilliant light. They looked at the twins and docilely folded their legs under to lie down. Oh, Japheth exclaimed, it's a good thing you're both so young. For the moment, I'd forgotten that unicorns will not let themselves be touched by anyone who is not a virgin. The twins glanced at each other. Well, we don't even have our driver's licenses yet, Dennys said. Get up on them before they decide they aren't needed, Japheth ordered. The twins climbed each onto the back of one of the silver creatures, both feeling that this was a dream from which they could not wake up. But without the unicorns, they would never make it to the oasis. The unicorns flew across the desert, their hooves barely touching the surface. Occasionally, where the sand had been blown clear and there was rock, a silver hoof struck with a clang like a bell, and sparks flew upward. Small desert creatures watched them fly by. Sandy noticed, but did not mention, some scattered bones bleached by sun and wind. "Hold on," Japheth cried in warning. "Don't fall off." But there was a sense in riding the unicorns of unreality. If this was no stranger than their mother's world of particle physics, it was at least equally as strange. "Hold on," Japheth shouted again, but Dennys felt himself sliding off the smooth flanks. He tried to grasp the mane, but it sifted through his fingers like sand. Was the unicorn becoming less real, or the still blazing sun affecting him? "Dennys, don't fall off!" Sandy shouted. But Dennys felt himself slipping. He did not know whether it was himself or the unicorn who kept flickering in and out of being. But he felt something solid standing on his unicorn pressing against him. Sandy's strong arms shoving him back onto the unicorn. The virtual particle suddenly real, not just something in the lab. His head hurt. Japheth and the mammoth were running beside them, amazingly swift for such small creatures. "Hurry!" Japheth urged the unicorns. "Hurry!" Sandy, his flannel shirt still draped over his head, was hardly aware that he was supporting his brother. His arms felt as fluid as water. He was breathing in great searing gulps which burned his throat. His head began to swell, to be filled with hot air like a balloon, so that he was afraid he was going to float off into the sky. The mammoth passed Japheth and the unicorns, leading the way to the oasis, so that the stocky legs were no more than a blur of motion like hummingbirds' wings. Occasionally, he would raise his trunk and make a trumpeting noise, urging the unicorns along. Japheth ran alongside, beginning to breathe, open-mouthed, with effort. But they were not fast enough for Dennys, who was slipping into unconsciousness, and as the world blackened before his eyes, his unicorn's horn became dim, and the silver creature began to dissolve as Dennys lost sight of hearing and thought. And Dennys flickered in and out of being with his mount. Sandy, barely holding on to consciousness, was not aware that the arm he had held Dennys with was now holding nothing. He felt himself drop to the ground. He did not land on searing sand, but on soft green. His burning body was shaded and cooled by the great fans of a palm tree. His unicorn had made it to the oasis.